morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. It's Sid from Sid Sticks. I'm back. I got a goodie today, guys. I'm back up north for my reunion. It's a 40-year for me, but I got two guys here that played 80 years ago in the Minnesota State High School tournament and won it. So I've got to my left here, right, you see here, Dr. Bob, and I'm not talking about Dr. Bob from the Muppet Show. It's Dr. Bob Harris, who was my dentist as a young man. And to my right, I got Rube Bjorkman, who was known back in the day as the Masked Marvel. Guys, there's a lot to talk about. I don't want to go in the background because the list is this long with your backgrounds. So we'll keep it simple. We'll just jump right into it. So, Bob, Ruben, I'm glad to have you here. I appreciate it. You know how I start thing, guys? I go back to where it all started. Back in Rosa when you were starting playing youth hockey. Tell us, Bob, you can start first and we'll talk to Rube. Tell us a little bit about when you were young, before you played high school. How did you play? Were you out in the street? There wasn't even an indoor rink back then, was there?
We did finish up the hockey in the indoor rink, just barely. And when I remember sitting up in the back corner when we were trying out for the high school, Ruben, I think, was a seventh grader and I was in eighth grade, but we had the uniform of the high school on. And as our pony line, Ruben and Markstrom, and I don't even remember Tommy Bjorn maybe, or somebody was the other wing. But we got dressed and we went to the game, maybe playing Badette or somebody like that, and sat up in the stands and watched, but we never got in until just barely later, before the arena was blown down that day. This was been about 1944 when the last year we had that game, high school games with other towns. Maybe Badette used to come down with 7 guys, and the seventh guy never played either. He had 6 guys there, never replaced them on the ice.
So there was no lack of ice time back then, let's say. Rube, what can you tell me about when you're playing before you guys played high school? Your experiences as a kid playing before you actually joined the high school team, playing outside, and can you tell about?
Just going to break for history a little bit, but I never played outdoors.
You never did. Okay.
When I was growing up, I lived in the Memorial Legion arena that was located about where the Legion Club right now is located. It was a barn, but it was indoors. And the reason I can remember so much about it is eventually my dad, who worked for the city, took care of that rink, and it went down in a summer storm when I was between 7th and 8th grade. So 8th grade we played, when I was in 8th grade, we played in the remnants of that arena. And then the following year, they went outdoors behind the school. One little incident about that, I got a hat on here. Clayton Comstock Caroso's got one, and Donnie Ross has got one. Should be more people from Warroad that don't have them, maybe from Rosal, but whatever. But anyway, Donnie Ross used to tell me he'd be at home across the street from the arena, and they'd wait and watch till my dad went there and opened it up and got the stove going before they'd run over to the rink, and they'd go over there every day, Nice.
Okay. Yeah.
But Donnie Ross lived right across the street, and you could look across the street and see when it was warm enough in there to play.
inside, but I'm sure it was just like being outdoors back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
I remember the North Rink when I was a kid. They had the North Rink. We'd have practices in there, and she was still a little crisp. It was pretty cold, so my toes they get darn cold. But I'm gonna pull up a picture. Let's jump in now. I want to show a picture of you guys here. By God, where's that state tournament team? In my eyes escape me. Where is she here? See, I gotta get there. By golly, I got far away. Here, I'm gonna pull up a picture of you. 19, I think this one is the one right there, is that right? Yes, look at that. There's that team he played in 1946. You're down here in the lower right with those goggles on. And I think, Doc, is that you up here right there pointing?
Right there,
Yep.
you got it.
And of course, we want to bring this up before we start talking about the games. I want you both to talk about this gentleman right here with fedora on, because old Oscar Alquist, I'm down in Winona now, and at St. Mary's, they got his picture up on the wall because he played goalie there, and he was quite a goaltender in his own right, but a Hall of Fame hockey coach. So, Doc, I'm going to go back to you. Can you tell me some experience about playing for Oscar? What kind of experience you have playing for the legendary Oscar Alquist?
Oscar was at a very young age. My father took me to the senior games when Oscar came to Roseau, and he was our goalie. And he got smucked in the face sometimes, and they weren't wearing any masks in those days. Then in 42 or something like that, I'm guessing, that he was a teacher at the school, but not coaching hockey yet. And we had a coach that came up from the Minnesota hockey team and coached for the 1 year in 42, and then Oscar took over, I think, in 43 or something like that. And he was there for many years, but he was a school teacher and he became principal, and he was very good at maintaining the core of the runaround kids in the high school. And if they were misbehaving, why they got to know Oscar.
Let me interject on that. I know when I was a little kid, he'd come on the ice, and you heard this voice, guys? Can you remember when you heard Oscar's voice? You'd stop in your tracks, wouldn't you? He was pretty vocal. He had a good voice there, didn't he, old Oscar?
I'll tell you one thing before I put a little history out on Oscar. As players, we always had Oscar's back. I mean, it wasn't all cream puff hockey in those days. Sometimes it'd be a little rougher, but Oscar was always there for us.
Okay.
And he started coaching in Williams. That was where he started teaching in Williams and was playing hockey for the Roseau Cloverleafs.
Okay.
He was tough. Then he did move to Roseau and started playing with the Cloverleafs and worked his way into the high school system. The 1 year coach that was our coach was a guy by the name of Babe Paulson. He was another Iron Ranger. 90% of the coaches in high school hockey at that time came out of England. And he was from Virginia, same difference. Babe Paulson. He was a good hockey player, but he only stayed 1 year or so. That's when Oscar.
Okay. Yeah. Well, good. Yeah, I know he's a legend, and I know when I was little, he'd come out and talk to us as goaltenders, and you could hear his booming voice. He had a booming voice for sure. But so in 1946, you guys made it down to the state tournament. I'm going to pull up that picture again, but I want to pull up something here. I got a picture of you guys here. This here is the all tournament team. There you guys are, you two, and there's some other great players back then. And we'll show that whole all tournament team before we get into the actual game. There you are. There's Bob, and I think there's a Gambucci on here.
Andy Gambucci is on it. Yes,
Right there. There's Andy.
And the goalie was Clark Wilder from Rochester. He ended up playing for Colorado.
Okay. Yep. There's
I
Clark.
think Gambucci did too.
That Gambucci name is a good name. I remember that name. Gary Gambucci. I'm sure there's some relation or somehow related, but there's the old young. Look at them young, strapping young bucks in those pictures there, huh? A couple young guys there. By golly, that's some memories. But you know what? Before I go any farther, before we talk about the game, let me. I'm gonna pull up a video of you guys getting the trophies you got that year, and just watch this and see if you can throw back your memories when this happened. There's no audio, but it's a cool little clip here, about a minute of the ceremony. So hold on one second. We'll bring it up here and we can show this to folks. That's great.
That must have been the all-state team that was
Yeah,
shaking.
they're
hands,
yeah. And we'll show the trophies in the end here. Yeah.
Yeah. Something that we should say is that we were the only team that played all their home games out of doors.
Okay.
And the whole other bunch of teams on the state roster, and they were all indoor hockey teams. And we happened to be the only one that played all our games because we had not yet finished or started even that indoor hockey rink that exists now is a piece of the federal and enjoyment visit for people who want to go to Roseau and see that arena complex.
A lot of history there up north here in that arena and over here in Warwick. So, Rube,
Well, let me talk about the 46 situation.
sure.
That was the second year of the state high school hockey tournament. Started in 45. Correct me if I'm wrong. The reason it started was because of he was either principal, superintendent, or athletic director in the St. Paul school system. Aldrich was his name, and I think it might be Ken, but I'm not sure about that. But in 45, he managed to convince a few businessmen around St. Paul to sponsor the tournament, pay rent for the arena and all this kind of business. And it started out with 8 ragtag teams, okay? You're lucky you get some of them, 1 or 2 of them didn't even have equipment, to start with. But it started in 45. It was popular with the newspapers in 46, and it has grown from that to what it is today. And it's when I, for example, went to the University of Minnesota a year or 2 after Bob, there were 2 indoor artificial ice rinks in the Twin Cities, St. Paul Auditorium and the Minneapolis Arena, which was located out on Lake Street in DuPont or something like that. And that's the rink the University of Minnesota played at, was the Minneapolis Arena. Hey, 2 rinks. Now, it isn't true, but there's one in the Twin Cities where there's a flux of good athletes, one arena almost in every corner. It's crazy how it has grown. And I get a little bit worried about where it might be headed because some rules that the NCAA have implemented that are going to affect the younger hockey players. I'm not so sure that you see a little trend of it right now. And the big one that's just happened within the last year or two is the Central Hockey League players being eligible. That's all 36 teams in Canada that played major junior. Up until a year or two ago, they were all ineligible, and I can speak personally of that. But now they're all eligible. Don't make any difference if they were getting meal money or room and board or whatever. It doesn't make any difference. Just so long as they have taken the prescribed curriculum in the school that the NCAA requires.
Times have definitely changed.
And
They've
the
changed.
teams now, if I were coaching a college team right now today, and I had the appropriate assistance, nothing. One would be living up in Canada watching these major junior players. And the old days, you go to the state hockey tournament
Watching
to
that.
watch and pick up players because you use seniors.
Well, what people have to realize, Rube, is that when you guys played, we're talking 80 years ago. I mean, it's amazing changes.
But it's going from what it was to what it is.
I can't remember, but if I pull it up in vintage Minnesota hockey, by the way, a little shout out to them. They do a wonderful job. I think it probably says in that book there too, Journey Time. I think the attendance in 1946 and 45, in the 40s was like 11,000. Now it's 100,000+. It just shows you how much this game of hockey in Minnesota has grown over the years. It's just unbelievable, unbelievable.
But I can put this to you. We enjoyed playing way back then before 11,000 people or whatever it was.
Well,
as much as these guys enjoy playing today.
we played a game because we love the game, that's for sure.
Ruben's got a better memory than I did. That Aldrich deal was wonderful because they got a few 5 or 6 businessmen in St. Paul and got us started. But the mistake they made, they couldn't help. They used the 8 regions in Minnesota for winning their hometown games so they could be at the state tournament. There were 3, at least, teams that came to the state tournament that didn't have any hockey. They didn't have any equipment, and it was a smash that 3 or 4 teams like White Bear and one of the Minneapolis teams and Thief River Falls and Roseau, they were the only ones that had the quality of teams to make it into the state. Ruben and I and Lowell went to the 45 tournament as spectators, and there were less than 200 people there.
Wow.
And by the time we got there, there were more than that of Roseau people that came to the game. Anyway, it grew fast.
We talked about that. Let's pull up the bracket from 46. I got the bracket here. Back in you guys won. Look at the teams that were in it. We have Evelyn, St. Cloud, Minneapolis West, and Rochester. And White Bear, you guys had a tight one in the first game in that quarterfinal, 2-1. And you beat White Bear, and then down below, Granite Falls, who doesn't have hockey now, but Granite Falls in southern Minnesota played Johnson. Johnson won. So then in the second round, you get another tight one, 2-1. 2-1 over St. Paul Johnson.
Yeah.
Rochester had a tight one over Evelyn, 2-1. But then when you guys got to that championship game, you pretty much handed it to them, 6-0. You beat that Rochester team. and you're in the title game and you come home with the trophy. So what memories you guys have of playing in that tournament? You know, I mean, you had two really close games, 2-1, and then that final game was pretty much a blowout. But what can you say about that? Let's
Okay, here's my opinion. I don't remember anything about the games.
yeah, okay,
I've been involved in too many.
sure.
But the one thing, there's three things that I really remember about that tournament. Number one, how popular Oscar was with the people that worked around the arena because he played for the St. Paul team professionally.
That's right.
They all knew Oscar. Then the second thing I remember about the games, the tournament, is we won. Okay. The third thing I remember is that we stayed at the St. Paul Hotel and we got to sit up at the counter and order almost what we wanted for Oscars out of that. So that's my three thoughts.
Well, those are three pretty memorable things to remember.
Yeah, the first thing is when we walked in that rink, how so many of those people knew Oscar.
Yeah, and, you know, I'm gonna put that picture up again of the team because Oscar's up there. I gotta look, my eyes are escaping me too. That's probably why I missed a few pucks when I played goalie back in the day. But I want to put the picture of Oscar up there. Where is it, Mike? I'm trying to see her again. My eyes get so bad. Yeah. So Mr. Alquist up there with the fedora. You know, I think, you know, then Willard Eichel used to wear a hat back in the day, and so did Larry Ross. So I think Oscar was the one that started it all with the old nice fedora, the hat there. But he was an icon in that. I'm glad you mentioned that, Rube. I forgot about the Oscar playing for St. Paul, but he's got that hat on, and I know a lot of coaches after him that came in to coach wore a fedora just like him. So yeah, he was a legend. So I'm glad you brought that up, talking about him. So let me do this now. You guys won the title that year. Let's hop up a few years now. I'm going to take the picture off here, but I want to take that off, and we'll jump back. Let's jump ahead now. So let's talk about post high school hockey. Both of you gentlemen went down to the University of Minnesota, but I want to understand now, Rube. I know the story of why you went to Minnesota, but can you tell it for people that one would have thought you would have stayed up north at Duluth, maybe over North Dakota, back or wherever. How do you end up at Minnesota with regards to playing there?
Back in those days, I don't know if you really were thinking much beyond the next day. Okay, what you were playing for, or why you like playing, and all that kind of business. I don't think you thought much about that. There were literally no scouts standing in the snowdrifts watching you play. So whether or not the coaches, I'll tell you what, the people that talk to you post tournament time were people that had probably been at the state hockey tournament, reading the newspapers or something. Now tell me, where am I going here with this?
How you ended up there? How you ended up there?
Oh, how did I end up at Minnesota? I talked to three teams that I talked to three coaches in Roseville, in Oscar's office. One was, he talked to all of us actually, was the coach from St. Cloud. They played outdoors. My brother went there. They had chicken wire fencing and all of that kind of stuff. And he lost me right off the bat because he said he didn't think any of us were good enough to go play for somebody other than somebody that was outdoors. Okay. So that one was out of it. Then I don't know who came next. Tell me who was Marsh Ryman. From the University of Minnesota, came up here with the coach at the time was Doc Brown.
Yes, like,
And they talked to us. There were no scholarships or nothing like that in those days. But I had been fighting my whole hockey career to see,
yeah,
with the goggles that Oscar got for me. So I got interested whenever I heard about contact lenses. And there happened to be right at that time a football player at Ohio State. Don't ask me what his name was. That wore contact lenses.
okay.
So I said, if you give me contact lenses, I'll come there. Okay. The other one that taught me was University of North Dakota, and that was very popular up here with lots of Warlord Rosal players. I'll give you another one, another kind of reason why I went to Minnesota. But North Dakota, wanted me to come there and play hockey and of all other things, football. And I played 1 year. We only had football in high school my last year, and I could always run. And in football, it's good if you can get away from them. So, but anyway, so I ended up going to Minnesota, and they came through with the contact lenses, changed my whole career. But also at Minnesota at that time, Bob Harris was there. Kenny Austin was there. These are also kids. Kenny Austin was there. Rudy Myers was there. Jim Alley was there. I don't know who else I could have met. Yeah. So it was loaded with Rosal kids,
Yeah, so,
And I remember Bob and all those guys. Freshmen were not eligible.
that's right, and you couldn't play.
Freshmen were not eligible. But because of all this Rosal, and there was even one very good, reliable Warlord board there.
Okay.
Dick Roberts.
Dick Roberts, that's
And
it.
he married a Warlord, a Rosal girl, Martha Marie Rao. But anyway, that was the big thing. But when Minnesota was practicing out in the DuPont Arena, they either took taxis or later on when Doc Ramos wasn't suffering from rheumatism or something, he'd drive a bus to the arena. And I got to practice with the varsity whenever they started, up until just about the time the full quarter was going to end. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because that's when they had the Olympic tryouts for 2 teams. At that time, there were 2 teams that represented the United States in hockey. One was the American Hockey Association team, AHA. The big thing about them is they were affiliated with the International Ice Hockey Association. I didn't know that. It didn't mean nothing to me. The other team that they went and had, the AHA tried out in Minneapolis. About a week later, the AAU team practiced in St. Paul and had tryouts in St. Paul. Don't ask me who made all the different teams. I can only remember the first phone call I got was from the AHA. So there was no real dummy. That's the team I decided that I would go with, and they flew me out to Boston, and they've already had the organization going there. And that's where Bob should have been. He should have been at one of those two trials. How I know about him, I don't know. I can't tell you. But I kind of think after the first semester, first quarter that we were on, I lived almost, well, I had coffee and rusks in the fall quarter almost a couple times a week with Dick and Marty Roberts. They had me over because I wasn't staying.
They helped you stay down in the city. Well, good for them.
Well, when I got home, I told my dad I'm not going back. I wasn't going to spend all winter playing freshman non-competitive hockey on a frozen tennis court. I'd rather played with the overleaves, but when I was home, that's when I got the call, so I took off.
Well,
different history.
Yeah, there's a lot of background on that, but back then that would be you got something, they gave you the contact. So now they call that NIL. So you were the first, you got free contact, so you were like way ahead of the game.
It was good. I guarded those with my leg.
Yeah, so I'm gonna scoot over here to Bob. Now, what brought you to Minnesota? How did you end up down there? Let's talk about your background. Why you ended up, and you guys played together. I'll pull up a picture, but let's hear your experience. Why you got there?
My uncles and my grandpa and my great grandpa were all dentists. And I was going to go, they all went to Northwestern. Northwestern didn't have hockey. Oh, I wasn't going to go to a school that didn't have hockey. Minnesota's got hockey, and they got a dental school.
There you go. That makes sense.
So I went down, and for some reason, that year, freshmen still could play because it was the very tail end of World War II. When I got there in 1946, the fall of, and I went out, and Ruben mentioned Rudy Meyer and Jim Alley and all those guys from Roseville that had just gotten out of the service. And we clubbed together and went down to the Minneapolis arena and did our recreational skating and got in shape. And when Larry Armstrong was the final year of coaching, he had started, he's a Canadian masseur. If you know what that means, it means he gives massages for a living. And he was the coach for 10 years of that Minnesota during the war. And he took us up. He was the toughest coach between periods I have ever seen. He used to grip my shoulder trapezoid muscle and pinch it and said, "Bobby, get going." And I'm telling you, I was in the best shape I've ever been in a hockey pair of skates. And he had it going so well that with all of these former college hockey players like Raleigh DePaul and some of these guys been to Michigan and they've been in the war in the service and they came back to Minnesota. They were from several guys from Evelyn, and those were the first of better hockey in Minnesota from years back of having played there. So here I am, and Ruben comes still back in school, and then they made a rule that freshmen couldn't play for a year after that. And Ruben was begging me, "Bob," he says, come on, come to the Olympics." And I said, "Ruben, I would love to, but my father wants me to continue into pre-dental and dental school, don't lose yourself from any time. So he and I had to part. And I, to this day, I regret,
Well,
but that would have been, Reuben had a wonderful goal of increased hockey, beautiful playing. And I thought, by golly, I wish I would have gone up there.
you got to see the world. Rube did.
Yeah, I could have gone to the big time in hockey.
Well, you know what, Doctor? I'm glad you stuck with what you're doing because you did a good job on my choppers back as a kid, taking care of me, and a lot of other people in Roseville County that you
Yeah.
worked on as kids. So that's that's quite the story. So I'm gonna show up here. You guys were talking about this, so let's pull up that team where you guys are on. Let's see if we can get a picture. We'll make it big, and we showed this before. Now there's Rube right on the far right, as you can see, and where you're a couple down. Is that you, number 5, right there? Is that you, Bob?
I'm leaning forward.
Yep, that's you. So there you two are. Back in 49-50. Anyways, look at that black and white. That's a classic picture right there of the University of Minnesota. And then you look at the back, that's chicken wire back in the day on the fence, for the boards, and then
There was a lot of Winnipeg guys there up for.
okay, a lot of Canadians now. And I'm gonna skip
There's not many Canadians on that team.
on that one. And that one back in the day had some good
Yeah.
hockey in Northerners. Let's go. So that's that year, and then I think this is the one. And you were gone, I think, in this year. I don't know why if you're in this picture or not, but I wanted to pull this one up for Rube because Rube's in this one. I want you guys to talk about Northern hockey. You got Rube's in here. Where are you? Up here, kind of over the left shoulder of that goaltender. And you know what that goaltender is? That's the legendary, I believe, Larry Ross, who went on to have a prolific coaching career at International Falls. So you guys, when you're at the university, you played with some pretty amazing players back in the day too. But I wanted to bring out Larry, and I think Ken Yackel might have been there as well. The Yackel name. There's a bunch of names that were at the university, but I particularly like to show this one, Rube, because of Larry Ross and going on to coach. So what can you tell me about some of the players like this guy here? What can you tell me about playing with the goaltender Larry Ross when you were there?
I made him in mind, he was from Duluth, Minnesota. In the military, his job was a deep sea diver. I mean, those guys just screw the hat on.
Wow.
That was his job in the service. He came back, I don't know how old he was there, but he was 2 or 3 years older than the rest of us. But he was a good goalie. He was a good goalie and a heck of a coach.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah. Another legendary one that wore the fedora, on the bench and won several state championships when he was over there in international
But
ball.
it's Larry Ross who got me going into hockey. I mean, got me going into coaching.
Yeah, that's one of the next things I was going to talk about. So I know your story. You didn't go to Olympics, but you went on to continue being a dentist and a storied career. But yet one of your sons carried on the tradition of playing in the Olympics in '76. We'll hold that thought for a second, though, because I'm going to scoot ahead a little bit now, because I want to go into the coaching. And Bob, we'll talk about you in a second about not coaching but refereeing, because I remember you refereeing a few games when I was a kid. So let's pull up your first coaching experience. I think your first coaching experience was with this team here. I think this was your first coaching experience. Was this Greenway? Greenway High School right here. No, that's you there. There's the glasses up here. No context, but you're up here. And I think I don't know. I think, did Mike Talk play for you in that team? Was there a Talk?
Yes, Mike Talk played. This were really interesting. Of that group right there, without my being, there's Mike Conway over there, there's John Lothrop over there, there's Jim Barley up there, and there's some other ones. 4 of them got college hockey scholarships.
Okay.
And those kids. Here's the amazing fact. Right here.
Who's that guy there?
That's Jim Barley.
Jim Barley?
I was their surrogate adopted son. Lou Barley was the high school football coach.
Okay.
His wife's name was Mary. I must have eaten more meals at their house than their kids did. But anyway, he, Jim Barley, and his younger brother, Mike, their dad was the football coach. He was also the basketball coach. And I got his two sons to play hockey. And they both went on. The one oldest one there went on and played lineman for the University of
Really?
Minnesota. And the younger one went to Dartmouth.
Good job. You got him to play hockey.
Hey, that's my crown and glory. I got the basketball coaches to play hockey, and they shot hoops out in their garage every day, you know.
You know, it reminds me of a story. I think of Willard Eichel, a guy, and I think his assistant. They go watch gym practice. They watch kids in gym,
Yeah.
and they say, that kid's pretty athletic. Maybe we should get him to play hockey. And that's what you did right there. The same thing. So I think you started it all then, going recruiting the basketball players, getting them to play the real sport, huh, Ray?
Boy, I tell you, well, you see some of these teams right now, they're high school teams, you kind of question who did the basketball coach miss out there.
Yeah. These kids aren't
Big,
small.
tall kids, you know.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
You know, I think that when Rube took over that Greenway and brought him up, and we forgot about Eveleth after that. Greenway had all the hockey players. But Eveleth still had a few, but the Hall of Fame is up there too in Eveleth. So that brings along a few visitors.
Bucking heads was international.
Yeah, international. Larry Ross.
You're getting kids from across the line, I think.
Well, yeah, that border.
I know.
Well, that's a whole different topic. Lefty current.
I don't know where Lefty was from. Was he from the?
He was the Falls. Yeah, he was from the Falls, but I think maybe Huffer Christensen was from across the board, if I remember right. But yeah, he had some good stories about the Falls guys. But you got something to say there, Bob?
Yeah, I got Ray Raymond Olson, from Fayetteville, and I refereed Larry. Larry came up to me one time after one of the periods, and he says, "Bob," I said, "Never mind, Larry, never mind. I'm your referee." And he was quite nice about it, but he thought I had made a bad call. And he always been my friend ever since. Played in a bunch of hockey or golf tournaments with he and his brother in International Falls and around the northern Minnesota area. And Larry was, of course, Ruben's best friend and about hockey and mine, and was a wonderful addition to the Minnesota hockey team.
I'm trying to think.
Larry loved golf. Had a lot of golf. He had a brother named Jim. Boy, was he a hot-headed guy. He threw more than one set of clubs into the pond in one of the two public courses in Duluth, you know.
I got a story about golf. I don't golf. I golf once every 5 or 10 years, for a reunion. Well, last time I played golf, Rube, I saw at a garage sale. I bought 2 old sets of wood clubs. So when I had a bad shot, I could break one or throw one, and people looking, what? Oh, don't worry about it. So I took my temper out. I didn't break new clubs. I broke the old wood ones. So it was funny. What was I going to say too? But I'm trying to think. Was there a Stadahar that played at the range? Was there Dick Stadahar? Was he from on Greenway? Attacking the area. You coached him,
And I coached. He was one of our goalies. He was John Wolfram was the goalie I had from grade 9 on up. But Dick Stadahar was the backup goalie.
Okay. Because I saw that name. I'm like, that's a horrible name. I remember.
It was the athletic director.
Yes. Yep. Many years. So I just wanted to make note of that when you coach there. So, well, I want to pull up some pictures now. We're kind of getting long in tooth. We're going to go a little longer, but we're going to wind her up. But I want to make sure I pulled up. I know you wanted to coach, and after Greenway, you were there just 1 year, if I remember. 1 year at Greenway, just one? Was it 1 year at Greenway? And you went,
8.
was it 8? Oh my goodness, I think,
I was there.
holy moly,
He brought that,
Yeah,
town hockey.
I apologize for that.
I was there 8.
I just pulled up the first year of coaching there, but then you went on. I wanted to bring up, you went to out east to coach some college hockey then at out east, and then on to the Sioux, North Dakota Sioux. And there was a lot of northern people playing there. You had Roseau guys, you had Warroad guys. Yeah, and then you had, I noticed some of the names. I want you to talk about some of those names because I looked at it. You had Marvin name, you had Christian at 1 year. I think Dave was over there. Roseau, you had Burgraff, Stone, a lot of different players. Hank Slavin, I think, played for you as well, right? Yeah, Alan's probably back this weekend, maybe. But can you talk about those years coaching over there at the University of North Dakota? Because that was, you had some good players that played there for you. And then Section 8, a lot of Section 8 guys.
Competition. Recruiting was what it is today because there were no computers.
Yeah.
You couldn't keep track of people unless you were out there. I was there at North Dakota. I had lots of good players, lots of good memories. Have some awfully good friends that played for me,
Sure.
But it's just one of those things. Didn't win enough hockey games
Yeah, right.
eventually. So when you're in the business, you either get the job done or they'll replace you. But I had lots of good players at North Dakota. I have lots of northern Minnesota, even the Twin City players, because high school hockey was really good. They were good players, and I could get to see them, during the season. I tell you one little story. Once we had a Sioux Booster meeting and left at noon, and I was on my way to Winnipeg to talk to a player that I been talking to, and I felt, man, I just got to go up there and finalize this thing. And that noon there was a major blizzard.
Well, we can have them up here, yeah.
Major blizzard. But I still was committed to go. Got a university car, started down I-29. I hadn't hardly got out of Grand Forks. And I went up a little sports car that was parked on the side of the road. And some young guy got out and it had Canadian plates on it. It just wouldn't run. He wanted to get home to Winnipeg. And he said he'd ride with me and watch for me. Well, we made it up there, but on every overpass, we couldn't drive through. We had to drive around and up because so much snow had drifted in.
Oh boy.
Okay, the whole point of the story is this happens all the time. Now, you hope not all the time, but it happens. So I called this kid up to let him know that I was in town and I wanted to visit with him. It was his brother that answered the phone.
Okay.
And he politely told me, he says, he's committed to Wisconsin. So, you never know. You never know.
Go all that way up in a snowstorm, none of that recruiting trip, and the guy already committed. Oh boy.
So there's lots of heartaches in that.
Yeah.
You just interviewed a good little player that I wish I could have gotten because I had been around and knew his parents and had followed him. He was mostly in a minor system. And it kind of was like Rosal had Ross, Malone, Oscar, Salem. We had those little towns of Marble, Calumet.
I know what you're talking about.
And the big one, Taconite.
Yep.
That was our minor system, and they had little outdoor rink, and they had kids that were playing, and they were developing, But the system was kind of like that. But I had lots of northern Minnesota kids, lots of Twin City kids, because I could watch them.
That
In
particular,
those days, you didn't have 5, 6 assistants. You were lucky if you had one.
and I imagine that guy you're talking about, referring to, was that Antonovich, Mike Antonovich? Yeah.
And okay, on little Mike, God, I can remember this. I went there to visit with him and his folks. It was like a whole week. I didn't have enough money left in the kitty to give him what he deserved, a full ride, you know.
Yeah.
So, no ifs, ands, or buts. Minnesota got him.
Yeah, and along with Dean Blaze, I think went down there with him. I think down south.
Yeah, I don't know.
They had a bunch of couple northern guys. go down.
No, I don't know. Well, Dean did, yeah, he might have.
Yeah, yeah, I
That
think-
might have been Dean. But boy, he was a good little player.
you know, that just goes to show the times changed. Back then, you actually had to physically go see a guy. Now they recruit, they got the portal and all this craziness.
Yeah.
It's really changed in the landscape for high school and college hockey. It's
There were some awfully good athletes playing hockey
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
Man, are they good.
yeah, that's for sure. I wouldn't. I'm afraid if I got between the pipes and put my goalie pads on, I'd get hurt. I no. Anyway, these big burly guys now, they're so big and strong, and the equipment and oof stuff.
You
So,
want to be quick so you can get out of the
yeah, you can just score on me. Go ahead. I don't want to get hit. I don't want to stop it, but I'm
the game is really growing. It's
Yeah.
crazy. But here's the problem that's coming up. Not only is it going to be through trying to solve it a little, not only are a lot more kids potentially going to be college players now with those 36 teams in Canada opening up, but you're trying to help out a little bit.
kind of expensive.
Hockey isn't a cheap sport.
No, I agree.
My God, sticks are over $300. Skates, I go out there, I watch a high school team skating, and honest to God, if there's a kid that's out there skating on something less than $900,
I know it's a shame. It's just a fright. It's a fright.
you know, I don't know what they're gonna do. And you go, these kids are traveling all over the place. My 2 grandkids are both bantam players, but they just quit playing hockey sometime early June, and now they'll be going back at it again sometime late in August.
Yeah,
You're on the road.
yeah. No, I hear you.
Hotel rooms aren't cheap.
Rube, you're preaching to the choir on that one. I know very well. I talk to a lot of parents and I see it. It's I call it checkbook hockey now. Checkbook hockey. It's just gotten so
What
expensive.
are you gonna do?
Yeah.
I mean, people are trying to make a buck off the sport, you know,
Well-
I'm not saying equipment.
Uh,
Yeah, it's crazy. My Olympic hockey pants weighed more than my top bantam grandson. Whole set of equipment or.
Yeah, well, we won't get started on equipment because I know my goalie pads, like nowadays you can pick up goalie pads with 2 fingers. They're that light.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. So I'm going to scoot back to you, but I want to go over to Bob here because, you know, we talked about the Olympics. You skipped that, you know, you didn't do that. But, you know, I'm going to say one thing. I want you to talk about, you had a son that played in 76 along with a couple other guys up north here, Blaine Comstock and also Gary Ross. But, you know, you weren't able to make it because you decided to say, I want to be a dentist. You know, Rube tried to get you to go, but you were able to kind of live that for your son. Can you tell me a little bit about that, Robbie?
Well, yeah, well, here's a story that I like to tell. One time I was in the cities at a meeting, and it lasted over the weekend. And then on a Sunday afternoon, Herbie was having a practice on Sunday night. He was mad. They had their original first game of the year with Duluth, the other Gopher and lost. So he called this practice for Sunday night. So
Okay.
I was on my way home with with my airplane, but I stayed, and Herbie says, "Come on, Doc, what are you doing here? Come on down." I went down, and he was getting dressed, and he was red-faced mad about his team losing to Duluth last night. And he says, "Oh, what am I going to do with these guys?" He said, "What do you think?" And I told him, "I think that John and Robbie really like it if they can play on the same line." And that was a lie. They had never played on the same line when they were senior and junior in high school hockey. But he put them together, and he said to, what was his name, the guy that ran that hockey column on Monday morning in the Minneapolis.
John Gilbert?
Yes. And what?
Gilbert.
Gilbert. And he had a dream that he was going to put John and Robbie on the same line. And later on, they had a game to play to go to the NCAA in Boston. And they played total hockey scoring on Friday and Saturday night. So it didn't matter if you won each game or whatever, you had to have the most goals. And we had a guy that got in a 10-minute penalty for fighting on Friday night, one of our Gophers, and we were ahead 3-1 that night, and it looked good. And we ended up tying the game at 3-3, and we went into the Saturday game even. And we won the game 2-1. John scored from Robbie, and Robbie scored from John. And it was a very high sort of feeling that went around to us tonight. It's one of the best things that all of our following the boys in their hockey, and it was the highest delight of all of those times that we watched the kids play.
I was going to say that's pretty fulfilling. I'm not kind of get winded down, but one of the things that being able to, we can. There's one of my favorite authors is John Maxwell. He has a saying: "Everybody can communicate, but everybody cannot connect." And I think connecting with your sons and seeing how well they did, and your son John, you played college hockey and that, and being able to go back and coach or do stuff in the community. That's to me one of the, you guys connected with a lot of people over the years, touched a lot of souls. So I just want to kind of wind it down. We could continue to talk about the Olympics or Roseau hockey.
I didn't quite finish that
No.
story because they ended up winning the NCAA in Boston that year in 1974. And it was, very satisfying. Spectators.
That's what I was getting at, being able to, really enjoy the experiences you had, but when you see your children be able to be successful, and I know you had, Nancy and Con and Robbie and Mark here sitting here, actually, to be able to see them be successful. That's what it's all being a parent. Looks like Rube had a comment over here. I was going to. Go ahead.
All the northern Minnesota kids we recruited when I was at North Dakota asked Bob about his own two boys. We didn't waste our time at North Dakota on John.
Because you knew already?
Because we knew that the golf at North Dakota couldn't match up anyway near with Minnesota. So we go to someplace we might win, okay? But Robbie, we worked hard to try to get Robbie at North Dakota, and he didn't make it.
I'm still sorry about that having to send Robbie down to Minnesota so that I could watch them both in one game. And Ruben deserved to get Robbie. Robbie was a better hockey player than John at that time. And he would have been a star like Earl Anderson or some of the other Rosa guys that were over there. And I still am regretful of making the decision to send Robbie to Minnesota instead of North Dakota. But it still stings a little bit when I shake Ruben's hand.
Okay, well, that's hockey, that's recruiting, but I was gonna, before you kind of wind down, I wanted to also finish up with talking about your coaching because you came back home here to Warroad, up north, and coached Warroad High School. And, played some players, in the 80s, early 80s. I played against a few of those. I think he coached Ryan and Ricky Christian, and I think it was also Scotty Knudsen was a heck of a hockey player. You had some good hockey players at Warroad back then, but you had to go through Roseau that day. So tell me a little about the experiences coaching back here in Warroad on the high school team. Can you just kind of shed some light on that for the people that watch this, their memories?
It's a job I didn't try to get. Okay. But they'd had some problems with the coach they had, what they were, I don't know. But a couple of the parents were after me to go on the high school, go after the high school team. But my job at Marvin's was 8 to 6.
Okay,
Thank God for Marvin's. Okay.
Yeah.
I enjoyed working for them. Great shooters. But Joanne Fosher, the head of the human resource, must have talked to somebody or somebody, and they gave me permission to leave work after 3:30 or 3 or something and go down and coach the team. And Scotty Knudsen was on that team. My own son was on the team, which is something I'll never do again. I'm going to coach my own kids or grandkids again. No way, because you can't. If you're trying to be fair, you are being fair, and all of this baloney. But I coached, and when my son graduated, that was enough for me. I was kind of burnt out. I think.
Yeah, well, you coached for many years.
I was burnt out. That's why I like my job at Marvin Windows. I liked my job at Marvin Windows because at that time, 3 of the principals were running the show. Bill Marvin, Jack Marvin. Where do you think this arena comes from?
Absolutely.
Jack Marvin and Tut Marvin.
Yeah.
And
well, I will say
I never worked for straighter shooters than that. The word was gold. I mean, no messing around.
Well, you look what's going on in this community here. Where we're sitting in your old house here. They've done a lot for the hockey community and for the community of Warroad area.
And the reason I was closer to Tut than any of the others, one of my captains at North Dakota was Scotty Marvin. And he was straight arrow, just like his dad. No messing around, just keep the business, And so I really liked them, I
was going to mention one thing. I don't know if it was John Mariucci or maybe it was Mayasich. I heard him say, because he talked about coaching in Warroad here, he would rather go on welfare than go back and coach his own high school team or team because it's a tough job being from the community around the area.
Well, what do they say if you want to coach the kids where you go with the orphanage?
Yep, I've heard that comment a lot, and that's true because then you don't have to worry about the parents because time. I'm not going to go into it, but times have definitely changed, with regards to that. There's a lot of what I call helicopter parents.
Yeah,
That's what it is. So, but you know, we've got a lot more we could talk about, but I want to make sure we get it going because you guys, I'm just so pleased and I'm happy that you were able to sit down with me. I will leave it with this. I mean, before I got two things. I'm going to throw it to you, then I'm going to make a comment. So I want you to say, is there anything that you want to talk about that I didn't bring up? Because there's so many things, but anything special that you want to bring up amongst your time in Roseau or Warroad or any part of the country where you coached or lived? Anything you'd like to bring out? Just it's something that maybe nobody knows about that you'd like to bring out. Anything in hockey life or
Bob and I can kind of pound back on history a little bit because we should have learned something in 80 years.
I can add to that.
go right ahead. What can you add to that, Bob?
My mother and my grandmother, when my grandmother moved to Roseau, and Roseau was very primitive, muddy Main Street. Cars, when she got off when my mother got off the train, they had their father, Sorensen, had bought a place. He had been selling land up here in the Roseau County at the time, pronouncing all over the state that what a gorgeous area that was. My mother got off the train and there was a horse and buggy stuck on Main Street right by the station that they drove up in the railroad. However, my mother then was later on married, and my grandmother at the same time were having babies. And I got to be ahead of Rube. I'm 3 months older than Rube. But we have a kind of a relationship as relatives better than most. It's mostly kind of hidden. Reuben was the best man at my wedding. We've known each other from afar for all these 80 years and loving each other to the max, but you wouldn't ever see us with a hug. We don't go that far, but the love is there.
Well, maybe we'll get you guys a hug before we leave today. Get it on camera. Huh? Maybe.
We might look down and hug.
There's just so much, gentlemen, that you guys could talk about. But you know, I'm glad you took the time, sit down, at least talk about some memories that we had here. But I always ask people this, Rube and Bob. One of the things I do before I leave, I said, you know, if I'm say you had a young, maybe your grandson or some local community kid that wants to have aspirations of playing at a higher level. You know, they come up to you and say, Mr. Harris, Mr. Bjorkman, what advice would you give me as a young athlete? I'm going to go to Rube first, Doc, and then we'll come to you. But Rube, what would you give a young athlete if they came up to you and asked you, what advice would you give me? How do I get better? What do you think I could do in my life? Or what do you recommend?
I'm involved in this because I've got grandkids involved, boys and girls. Play as many different sports as you can. Do well in school. Grow up to be good Christian, good citizen, you know. And shoots me the most is you can't do it for the kids. You cannot make them into something that they don't want. Okay? In my own case, I think I gotta always be giving these kids some drills for something that helps them along the way, okay?
Yeah.
That might not be right, I don't know. But the other night, the thing that made me really feel good, I was going out, because I live in there, I live where they are at, because my grandson, when he was building his log house, he lived in the basement for 4 years, so they got a kind of it's an apartment almost downstairs. But the thing that got me, I didn't have to go tell them to work out. They were both taking off down the road running, I didn't have to tell them to do that. They did it on their own. You've got to do it yourself.
There you go. And that leads to, I've interviewed a lot of people, Rube, and the one thing is you got to have a passion and a love for the game. If
Yeah.
you don't, it's not going to ever work.
There's no easy way. There was no easy way. There were some guys, we got a couple, 2, 3 examples right here in Warren that they're super athletes, but they also work at it.
I agree with you 100%. That's a common theme amongst all the people I talk to. So on that note, I'm going to go over to Bob here. Doc, what would you say to a young athlete or young person?
It's a ditto. It's a ditto for what Ruben said. We did a lot of things with the kids that expanded on their life blood. They were energetic. They wanted to do everything, and we let them go, but always legal, always with Christian attitude, and they have loved each other all the way along the line, and had a very wonderful life family of watching them grow up and get better at what they did. Good nutrition and lots of self-imposed activity.
So, well, I think you guys summed it up there. I mean, that's when I went back to the comment about everybody can communicate, but not everybody can connect. And I think you've connected with a lot of lives in the world, whether it be sports or in general, in both these communities that you're in, Roseau and Warroad and the Northern and the hockey community in general. I mean, it's all about being good people, being good citizens. That's why we coached. Why I coached is not just for the game, but to bring these young people, make them good adults.
I'm sure all sports got a big family, but you can't go any place without running across somebody that's got some kind of a hockey connection with you. Okay. You can't, it's a big family. I mean, you're not, there's no brotherly love when you're playing each other. No. I mean, Roseau Warroad, best competition in the world. Roseau Warroad. When you're playing each other, it's lights out. Okay. But when the game's over and at the next level, someplace, your best friend is the guy from either wherever you're from, Roseau or Warroad.
Yeah, I got some good memories as a kid growing up competing, and I talked to guys back there from Warroad, and good memories, and that's the thing
I
about it.
only wish in our area up here, I only wish that one little town that has a chance, but COVID kind of kicked them in the teeth, and that's Badet.
Yeah,
They were on the road to being very competitive because the State High School League had allowed them to use kids from across the line. COVID kicked them behind.
that's a whole different topic. We can talk about COVID, but that's a good point you make there. So
It changed everything.
I can't thank both of you enough. And by the way, I didn't mention it, but I want to make sure that Bob, you had a book you made, so I want people to know that you know, if you want a little bit more history about Roseau and Warroad and the hockey and just in general,
Yeah,
first 100 years. So you can take a look at it on Amazon. And Rube, you should get together and have a memoir, write a book too, to get somebody to help you out here because by golly, I tell you, if you two combined your thoughts though, it'd be larger than War and Peace. I can guarantee you that. That'd be one
I
book.
tell you what. How to run one of these new telephones.
Hey, yeah, I have problems with it too. I'm not no techie, but I know enough to be dangerous, so that's why I do this. But gentlemen, we're gonna end it on that because there's so much more. I don't want to take much of your time. You were pleasant enough to give me this an hour, and I really appreciate it sitting down here and talking to you. You got
say it was a pleasure to be here with Ruben and bare our souls about every little thing and talk and kind of brag at each other with our families. So it was a pleasure. And thank you, Sid, for being here for us.
I'm glad I came back. I had a reunion this week, you know, and to get you two together, it's you know, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. Yeah, we'll do it. We will. But you know, that's it. That's it. You know, guys, those watching, I'll just post this up and I'll send you the link. But I appreciate it. To my right, to my left, but you're right on the computer, Dr. Bob Harris, my dentist as a youth. To my right, Rube Bjorkman. I tell you what, it was quite an experience talking to you guys. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. So on that note, guys, so long, everybody.